Harriet regarded her lingerie drawer. Her husband, John, was nearby in the bathroom brushing his teeth getting ready for bed. They had been out that evening at a dinner party with friends down the block. When they had gotten home, their 10-year-old son Timmy was sleeping peacefully in his bedroom. Ever since he had been 8, they had felt Oklahoma to leave him without a sitter if they were just a few doors away in the neighborhood. It was a very safe community they lived in. There had been nothing amiss in the house when they had come home, except now, when Harriet had taken off her slip and had folded it neatly and was about to put it back in the dresser drawer. She noticed that something didn't seem right. The problem wasn't necessarily with her bras and panties, which looked pretty much like she had left them. No, it was her slips. She could see that the top slip on the pile was not folded as neatly as she always folded them. She picked the slip up and let it open up. It had definitely not been folded correctly. Timmy must have touched it. There was no one else who could have. Probably some adolescent curiosity was creeping into him now that he was approaching puberty. Hopefully this would be a one-time event and she had better not get worked up about it, though she didn't like the thought of her son poking around in her lingerie drawer. 3 weeks later, the incident was out of her mind when she came home after a bridge night with other neighborhood friends to discover that her dresser drawer was not fully shut. It was just a tiny bit ajar, but she was more than a little bit obsessive about shutting drawers, so she didn't think she could have left it open. She looked inside the drawer and saw that her bras may have been touched, and so too her panties and slips. Damn, she thought, that Timmy is getting out of hand. She then opened the closet to put away her dress and noticed that a pink, cotton sundress that she rarely wore was hanging a bit askew on its hanger. Harriet sat down on her bed in a state of shock. John walked into the bedroom and asked her what the matter was. Harriet shook her head and told him nothing, it was just her stomach that felt a little bit flippy-floppy. "I hope you aren't getting sick," he said. "Oh no, it's already passed," she said. She had decided that she had better not tell John. Surely he would wake up Timmy in a tirade of anger. It would be too ugly. She would have to handle this herself. That week Harriet went to an electronics store and bought a tiny wireless spy camera and had the salesman explain to her 5 times exactly how it was to be used, especially how to record and send the video to her computer. Later that week, while John was at work and Timmy was at school, she set up the camera on the top of a picture frame in her bedroom so it had a sweeping view of her bed and dresser. "It's not spying," she said to herself, "not like it would be if she put it in Timmy's room." She hoped against hope that the camera would not turn up anything of interest. The first opportunity she had to catch Timmy in the act of invading the privacy of her bedroom and clothes was that Tuesday. Every Tuesday and Thursday Harriet worked part-time at the local school district in the central offices until 5 in the afternoon. On those days Timmy let himself in after school at 3 and was alone until either Harriet or her husband came home. Before she left for work that day, Harriet turned the camera on and set the timer to begin recording at 3. When she came home from work that day, fearful of being caught either by her husband or Timmy, she made no attempt to look at the video. Instead, she waited until the next morning after Timmy left for school and John had gone to work and the house was empty. She turned on her computer and began playing back the video file. For 15 minutes she watched a fixed view of the room, and then suddenly the bedroom door opened and Timmy, naked, tiptoed into the room. She heard him say "Mom," as if double-checking that she wasn't somewhere lurking in the shadows. She hadn't seen him naked for a half-dozen years, and her heart tensed with affection for the thin little figure she saw. His penis was a tiny little thing, and she watched as he walked to her dresser. He opened her bra and panty drawer, and she watched in a state of disbelief as his body tensed and seemed to convey a degree of excitement equal to that if he were to have opened a long-lost chest of pirate gold. He used one hand to lift up the top few bras and with the other took out a pink bra. It was her only pink bra, actually she hadn't worn it for years. It was a bra she had gotten when she was younger and worried about being sexy. Now she preferred more functional bras that were more comfortable to wear. The pink bra was a bit tight on her breasts had filled out a little with age. If she remembered correctly, the bra probably had a B cup, not the C she wore now. She watched as her son almost comically put on the bra. He clearly had no clue how to do it correctly. Once he had it on, she saw him take panties and very carefully stuff them into the cups. Next he took out a panty from the very bottom of the pile and put it on. It was a faded pink and almost a rag. His little penis pushed ever so slightly against the nylon fabric. Abruptly, Timmy closed the drawer and opened the one below. She wondered what he would do with her hosiery drawer, put on pantyhose? Instead, he took out an old girdle of hers. She had even forgotten she still owned it. It had a shiny satin front panel in a sort of diamond shape and an open leg style with a side zipper and a set of 3 garters on each leg. Timmy slipped into it, zipped up the side, and then lay down on the bed. He lay there quietly without moving, and she watched his face as it softened and relaxed. He crossed his arms across his chest below the bra. He looked like a thin, gentle little girl wearing her mommy's clothes. Harriet felt herself tearing up and becoming deeply sad. She had expected to see Timmy masturbating, but he didn't. He just lay there looking blissful and then also forlorn. The full impact of the scene slowly dawned on her. Timmy wasn't raiding her drawers for a sexual thrill. No, he was pretending to be a girl. After a while, Timmy got up and went to the closet. He put on the pink sundress and lay down again on the bed. Harriet watched as Timmy began crying. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He suddenly got up and got a tissue and went back to lying on the bed. Even though he was crying a bit, he looked blissful. It was heartbreaking to watch. After a while, Timmy seemed to be having a dialogue with an imaginary person. His arms moved in a delicate, graceful fashion. He had very pretty hands, she thought. Girl hands. Harriet wondered what she ought to do. Clearly Timmy was getting very careless. Maybe he even wanted to be found out. But his father would become a force of nature if he knew what she was witnessing. He would never understand. God knows what he would do. Timmy got up and kneeled next to the bed and formed his hands in prayer. She had a view of his back in his dress, and if she hadn't known better, she could have mistaken him for a girl. In his tiny voice she heard him say, "Please God, make me a girl. Please, please, please. I'll do anything. Please God. Just this one little thing." Timmy dabbed at his eyes with the tissue and blew his nose. He got up and lay down again on the bed, and Harriet heard him sobbing. In a few minutes he looked at the clock on the nightstand and got up again. He removed the dress and put it back in the closet and then did the same with the lingerie. She saw him double-check that everything was back in its place, and then he exited the bedroom. Harriet got a tissue herself and dabbed at her eyes and blew her nose. She thought back to how she had raised Timmy. It was true that she had felt a twinge of disappointment when she had given birth to a boy. She had been so convinced her baby was going to be a girl that it was a shock to find out she was wrong. However, when she had first held Timmy, she couldn't have been happier that God had sent her a little boy. Perhaps she unintentionally raised Timmy to feel like a girl, but if she had done so, she couldn't for the life of her see how she had done it. John was a fully engaged dad. He was good with Timmy, played with him often. They did occasional dad/son activities, things that mainly only guys did. Timmy was not a mama's boy, though she had always felt that he was on the sensitive side of things. Sometimes it seemed like he cried too easily like some girls did, but it had never been a real problem. Over the next few days, Harriet pretended in her dealing with her husband and Timmy that all was well. She bent over backwards to seem happy and relaxed, while inside she felt a terrible, suffocating helplessness. She didn't do anything to prevent Timmy from invading her clothes. She worried that if she was to tip him off about knowing what he was doing, then she would be stuck with a problem she didn't know how to handle. The consequences of confronting him could unalterably change her relationship with him, and she could not stand the thought of that happening. She also worried that getting caught in such an intimate misdeed by his mother could lead Timmy to a lifetime of trauma. A week went by and finally, in desperation, she arranged to have lunch with her sister, Ruth, who was a couple of years younger, childless and single. Ruth was a career woman in the fashion industry, and she and Timmy had a special bond that was only possible because Ruth wasn't his parent. Ruth was very fond of Timmy and Timmy looked up to her. Over lunch at a chic restaurant in town, Harriet said, "I asked you here for a purpose. You see, I have a problem. You know I'll help any way I can." "Is it with John?" No, it's with Timmy." "Timmy!" Ruth's face, which had formed into a frown in anticipation of hearing that John had been cheating on her sister, now turned to one of genuine worry and concern. "What's the matter?" she asked, fearing for the worst. She couldn't imagine that Timmy would be a drug taker or misbehave at school. She wondered if he had come down with a terrible illness. "You have to swear to not tell anyone anything I say here. Especially John, and certainly not Timmy." "Sure, Harriet. You know I never would betray your trust." "Good. Well, you see, I've discovered that Timmy dresses up in my clothes. My bras, my slips, my panties and a dress. Even my old girdle." She went on to describe the initial evidence and then about the camera and Timmy's prayers. Ruth listened with her mouth agape, every so often saying, "Oh my." Harriet had fought back tears as she spoke, and Ruth reached out across the table and held her sister's hand. "I haven't confronted him or even done anything like lock my bedroom door. I didn't want to get John involved or cause Timmy to freak out. So what can I do?" "What should I do?" Harriet said. "Oh my gosh," Ruth said, "I need to think, it's so surprising. I thought you were going to say he was sick or something." "Well, I guess I agree that you don't want to tell John. Bless his heart, I doubt if he could be at all helpful in this situation." Ruth was thinking what advice she ought to give. She imagined Timmy in a bra and girdle and dress. Girdles were so uncomfortable, but if you wanted to be feminine, she supposed it was right on up there with a bra. "I guess we have to believe that what he was praying to God about is true. He sees himself as a girl. From what I understand, he'll probably always feel that way. It's indelible. I don't want to make you cry again, but I think you have to accept this truth the same as if he grew a third arm. Denial or ignoring it will not help, but I agree that confronting him might not be the best thing to do. It's probably a good idea if he can be coaxed into taking control of his own situation." "How can we do that?" "That's a good question. He needs to tell you on his own free will that he's been sneaking around in your drawers and why." "That's exactly it. We need a confession. It would take him from being just a naughty kid that John would clobber if he found out, to a kid who is looking to his parents for help with a problem. I mean, I don't think that John would kill him if Timmy confessed to him his desire to be a girl. Would he?" "You're right. Even if he did initially get mad, he'd soon see he was wrong and apologize. I give that much credit to John." Ruth scrunched up her face in thought and then said, "But perhaps that's going too fast. Maybe just a confession to you would be a good start. I can't imagine Timmy standing in front of John telling him he was a girl, but with you I could see it." "But then what?" "We could see how this goes and then make up a new plan later. For the moment you want to stop him from raiding your clothes, and you want to do it with the least trauma. That says that we need to leave John out of it for the time being with good justification. So the problem becomes, how could we get Timmy to confess to you?" "Someone else would have to convince him to tell me what he was doing," Harriet said. "Exactly," Ruth said. "You could let me discover him cross-dressing. It would be a bit traumatic for him, but much safer, nothing as bad as having you find out. But it could ruin your relationship with him." "I don't think so. It might even draw us in closer, particularly if he saw that I wasn't condemning him, just trying to set him on an honest path. It could help him to maintain his self-respect throughout this ordeal." "Okay, but how could we do it?" "You can't barge in on him at my house. Maybe you and John could take that little jaunt to Puerto Vallarta you always talk about to reenact your honeymoon, and I'll watch Timmy at my place." It seems like a safe bet that he'll invade my lingerie drawer if I'm at work, and I'll try and catch him in my bedroom by coming home early. And then what? Then we can have the big conversation in which he tells me the whole story of his cross-dressing and wanting to be a girl. I'll tell him he has two choices. If he intends to cross-dress again, then before he does so, he has to first confess to you his desire. If he doesn't ever cross-dress again, then he doesn't have to say anything, and I'll promise to keep it a secret forever. But we know he won't or can't stop. So we can be pretty sure that he'll end up confessing his desire to you, and then you can make sure that he doesn't go into your dresser drawer. The two ladies thought about the plan and discussed it further. I think it's a great plan, Harriet, because it will get you involved in a positive way, on his side. It gives you some control. I agree, Harriet said. So instead of me confronting him, he'll never know that I know what he's doing, and he'll eventually come to me with his problem. That sounds great. I'll talk to John tonight and see if we can get away soon. A few weeks later, with Harriet and John away on their second honeymoon, Timmy moved in with his Aunt Ruth. It was the spring break at school, and Ruth planned to take a day or two off from her job to be with Timmy. He came on Saturday, and over the weekend they did many fun things together, like visit museums and shopping, and even went to movies they could both enjoy at the Cineplex. To outward appearances, Ruth could find nothing about Timmy out of the ordinary. In fact, their mutual fondness for each other made for a delightful, easygoing time. Ruth stayed home from work on Monday morning, and at lunchtime said she had to go into the office for the afternoon to take care of some important business. She expected to be home at 5 in time to make dinner. Timmy assured her, a bit too eagerly she thought, that he would be fine being alone by himself. She had to laugh to herself, thinking what kind of entertainment he probably had in mind. Ruth left the apartment and went to work. She knew she would feel better in the long run if she didn't have to lie about having been at work that day. At 3 p.m., 2 hours earlier than she had said, she headed back home to see what she might see. The reality of sneaking in on Timmy was much harder than her fantasy about what it would be like. The fact of the matter was that she was so fond of him, it was painful to contemplate the embarrassment she would cause him by catching him in the act. But she had to do it, since it would be better in the long run for Timmy than to do nothing. She quietly entered the apartment and looked around. Timmy was not in sight, and everything looked pristine, just as she had left it. Her bedroom and the guest room where Timmy was staying were across a carpeted hallway from each other. Ruth tiptoed through the apartment toward the hallway. When she got to the door of her bedroom, she saw that it was partway ajar, even though she had made sure to close it before she had left. This was exactly what she imagined she was going to find. Her plan now was to call out to Timmy as if she expected to find him in his bedroom while simultaneously entering her own. That way she would look completely innocent of having snuck in to catch him. She braced herself for what she might find in her room. She counted to 3 and then pushed open her door, backing in and calling out, "Timmy?" She heard a shriek behind her, and as she rapidly swiveled around, she was just in time to see Timmy spread out on the bed wearing her bra and panties. He leapt up, arms flailing in the air as if to block her view, and ended up crouching on the floor next to the bed in a fetal position. He sobbed and wailed uncontrollably and struggled to get the bra off. She noticed that one of her prettiest slips was lying on the bed nearby. "My God, Timmy, I wasn't feeling so good, so I came home early. How could you do this? How could you sneak into my bedroom and open my drawers and wear my clothes?" Timmy managed to take off the clothes. He put them on the bed while hiding his nakedness. "I'm sorry, Aunt Ruth," he wailed. She picked up the bra. It was one of her everyday bras. The panty was light blue with several rows of ruffles across the bottom. It had once been part of a Halloween costume. "I'm putting my clothes back in my dresser. I'll turn my back and you can run back to your room and get dressed. Then I want to meet with you in the living room." She said this with as stern a voice as she could muster. Timmy hurriedly got up to do as she ordered, and as he did so he said, "Are you going to tell my mom and dad?" "Maybe," Ruth said, "but first I want to talk to you, so get dressed." A few minutes later, Ruth and Timmy were sitting together in the living room. Timmy had a fistful of Kleenex in his hand. Ruth couldn't recall ever seeing the boy in such a miserable state. "Look, Timmy, if the truth be known, I'm more upset at catching you sneaking around in my personal property than I am about you wearing a bra and panties," she said. "Not that I'm wildly happy about that either." Timmy seemed like he was trying to form some words, but instead went into a new convulsion of crying and blew his nose. Some snot dangled between his tissue and nose, and his eyes were bright red from crying. "I don't know why you want to wear my bra. You're a boy, aren't you? But the thought of you sneaking around in my clothes is very disappointing to me. It doesn't seem like the Timmy I know and have always loved. What is that all about?" Timmy calmed down enough to say, "I know I'm gross and disgusting. You're saying that to stop me from punishing you, aren't you?" "No," he shrieked. "Okay, Timmy, I really want to talk to you about this, not just punish you. So tell me why you did it." "I don't know why I did it." "You'll have to do a lot better than that," Ruth said sternly. She wasn't going to let him off the hook easily. "Start with why you snuck into my room." "I guess I thought that if I just borrowed your clothes for an hour and put them back that you wouldn't notice." "Okay, I can figure that part out myself, but what made you think to do it in the first place?" "The first moment alone from me and all of a sudden, boom, you're right into my clothes." "I just was curious," Timmy said. "Curious?" "Look, young man, I'm expecting a lot better answers than that," Ruth said. "We're not going to leave this room until you explain why. And if I'm not happy with your explanation, I'll definitely have to tell your parents. For all I know, you sneak into your mom's bedroom also." She was being harsher than she really wanted, but couldn't let him do a Ronald Reagan on her. After sniffling quietly for several minutes, Timmy said hoarsely, "Can I tell you something you'll never tell anyone else?" "I suppose so." "Sure, I won't tell anyone." "Well, I remember once a few years ago seeing my mom wearing a bra. She was in her underwear." Timmy paused and seemed to be fighting back tears again. "Go on," Ruth said. "I don't know. Later that night I was going to bed. I was lying there and I remembered what I had seen, and I thought that I should probably have to wear a bra also. Just like my mom. But I know it's gross and I will never do it anymore." Wait, back up, Timmy, and enough about it being gross. "So what did you do?" "I thought about it." Timmy became silent. "So today was the first day you finally decided to wear a bra?" Timmy began crying in earnest again, and Ruth said gently, "Be honest, Timmy, and I promise you that everything will end up being all right." Timmy blew his nose and Ruth continued, "So, have you ever done what you did here anywhere else?" Ruth asked. "I've done this a few times with my mom's clothes." "With your mom's clothes?" "When she and my dad were out. I couldn't stop myself. Sneaking around in your mom's personal clothes cannot be nice." Ruth smiled inwardly. This had been so much easier than she had thought possible. A full confession, and she was sure that one day Timmy would be admitting the same things to Harriet. "I know. I've felt badly about it, but I couldn't stop myself. Like today, I tried to stop myself, but then the thought that I could be so happy made me do it, and I told myself that if you didn't know I was wearing your bra and panties, it wouldn't really hurt you. Like suppose somebody borrowed your bicycle without asking you and returned it before you knew it was gone. Would that bother you?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Because they might hurt it." "Yes. They put your things at risk without your permission to do so. In the case of my underwear, it's the most intimate part of a person, and I feel like you're violating my most private space." Timmy fought back more tears and grew silent. "Will you do it anymore?" No, like I said, I won't," Timmy said, and as he did so he felt a state of panic overtaking him. He loved his mom's clothes. He loved her panties and bras, and especially her slips. And that wonderful pink sundress. Lying in bed dressed like that was the happiest he had ever been, and he couldn't imagine not allowing himself to be that happy again. Won't do what? I won't wear your clothes or my mom's clothes anymore. But what about wearing ladies' clothes? Ruth asked, knowing that this was the far bigger issue to get into. Oh, I mean, I also won't wear girls' clothes anymore, Timmy said. Ruth regarded him tenderly. That was certainly a promise he would never be able to keep, but it provided the perfect opportunity to spring the trap she had worked out with Harriet. I'm willing to not say anything to your mom and dad about what you did today so long as you promise me one thing. What's that? Timmy asked with some hope. That if you ever find yourself not being able to stop yourself from wearing ladies' clothes again, then you will first have a talk with your mom about it. But I'm never going to do it again. I know you said that, Timmy, but I still want you to make this promise to me. Is it agreed? You don't believe me, Timmy said. I believe you, Timmy, but how you feel today might not be how you feel tomorrow. So, let me ask you again, if you do want to dress up as a girl in the future, do you promise to ask your mom first? Yes, Timmy said. And you won't be sneaking into your mom's or my clothes or any other lady's clothes anymore? No, I won't. Good, then my lips are sealed. I won't tell your mom anything that happened here today. Ruth smiled at Timmy, who still looked utterly miserable. Let's not let this incident get in the way of our having a good time this week, Ruth said. In fact, let's go out to dinner tonight. Timmy looked depressed and still afraid to look her in the eye, but he attempted to make a slight smile and said, okay. It had to have been a deeply traumatic experience for him, and now he had to go through his mother to get to wear girls' clothes. Perhaps it would prove to be a big enough obstacle to stop his behavior for a few weeks or even months, who knew? Thankfully, at least Harriet would now have the chance to take control of the situation once it developed, and that beat a blank, as they say. Timmy and Ruth still had better part of a week to spend with each other, and though initially awkward, within a day or two they returned back to their usual relationship. At dinner one night, feeling a bit encouraged, Ruth said, I just wanted to say that I hope you know that I love you very much. I love you too, Aunt Ruth, Timmy said. I'm glad. I want you to know that whatever happens in the future, you should know that I'll be there for you. I'll provide a sympathetic ear. You're not mad about my... No, definitely. Please. It's not easy growing up, finding one's way, and I understand that. No one is free from errors of judgment or mistakes that they have to learn from. You're a wonderful boy, Timmy. I couldn't imagine a nicer nephew to have. Both she and Timmy became a bit choked up. As far as what happened here, I won't say anything to your parents, but like we agreed to, you should talk to your mother about your feelings in case you get those desires again. I don't think I'll ever have to, but if I do, I promise I'll talk to her. But don't you think she'll get mad or cry or something? Your mother loves you very much. It's as close to unconditional love as love can be. Whatever you say, as long as you're honest, she'll be happy to know that you confide in her, and she'll try her best to do what's right. There was a lull in the conversation while Ruth assumed that Timmy was thinking whether or not his mom would think that it was right for him to dress like a girl. Do you believe in God, Aunt Ruth? Timmy said, startling Ruth. Why, I suppose so, sort of. In truth, she said what she said so as not to prejudice whatever Timmy was about to say. Why do you ask? Sometimes I wonder about God watching me do things, like what I did, in your bedroom. I think it's what is usually called your conscience. That's the idea that we try to do the right thing because we're watching ourselves and we don't feel good if we do bad things. Seeing that Timmy was perplexed, she said, it means that you have to think about what you do, not just let God do all the watching and thinking. She hoped that he would think about this the next time he wanted to dress up as a girl. But sometimes it may be that I think it's okay and God doesn't. Or what if God wasn't watching what happened? Ruth wondered what he was driving at. I guess there are times when it's hard to figure out what is right and wrong. And maybe God can make mistakes, and then a person could do something that looked to be wrong but was really right. Ruth wondered what powerful forces were bubbling up through Timmy's inner soul. She felt sorry for Timmy that he had to come to terms with who he was in a world where people had to be very much concerned with what others thought about them. At his age, it was even more difficult to be oneself. On top of that, her poor sister Harriet was going to have to end up with this entire problem in her lap one day. It was a question of when and not if. That, perhaps depressing news, was what she would have to report to her sister when she got back from her trip. The day after she returned from her marvelous vacation with John, Harriet met with Ruth and got a complete accounting of what had transpired. The two women were more convinced than ever that they had done the right thing thus far. Harriet was unhappy to hear that Timmy had invaded Ruth's private space, but glad that at least his predilection to wear girls' clothes was out in the open. The next big step in their plan was to await Timmy's confession if it should come. The two women discussed what options they had when the time came to respond to Timmy, and left a final decision as to what to do until such time as it might be needed. At first, Harriet expected Timmy to present himself to her with his confession at any moment, and she felt tense and irritable awaiting it. Happily, the video camera showed that Timmy had definitely stopped going into her room when she was gone, except one time when he entered, stood in front of the dresser and then left. It saddened her to see the agitated expression on his face, but she was also glad that he had enough courage to control his impulses. Another week went by and Harriet was thinking less often about Timmy and thinking that maybe he would never bring up the subject of his cross-dressing. She and John had gone out to play bridge, and when she came home she had turned on her cell phone to see there was a text message from Ruth saying it was urgent that she call her. While John was getting ready for bed, she snuck down to the kitchen and did so. "Timmy called me this evening," Ruth said. "Really?" "Yes, he asked me if he really has to talk to you about wearing girls' clothes." "What did you say?" "Well, first I asked what happened. Since the last time we talked, he was so convinced he would never want to wear girls' clothes again." "What did he say?" "He said that he was going crazy. He was sure that he was really a girl. He couldn't see not dressing like a girl." I told him that it was good that he had reached a clear vision of himself, but that he definitely had to live up to his end of the agreement. He sounded a bit depressed, but also resigned to what he had to do. "So I just wanted to give you a heads up. I think he might try and talk to you tomorrow." "Thanks, dear. You've been a big help." Harriet passed a restless night worrying about what she would say to Timmy. The best idea she and Ruth had worked out was to give him some clothes and a restricted time when he could wear them. They definitely agreed that it was not a good idea to refuse him the opportunity. The next day when Timmy came home from school, he was terribly distraught. He was on the verge of crying, and Harriet braced herself for whatever it was that he was going to say. "What's the matter, honey?" she said with some alarm. She had decided that without doubt she would never give Timmy any hint that she already knew about what it was he would want to confess to her. Besides making him lose trust in Ruth, she wanted to give him every opportunity to find himself, to find for himself what he needed to do. It was a very tall order for a 10-year-old, but in her heart she felt this would create a foundation of strength in him that would enable him to weather whatever storms were to come to him later in his life. "Mom," he said with a tremulous voice. The misery, fear, hopelessness in his voice rent her heart into pieces. "What happened, Timmy?" Harriet said, trying to sound like she would normally sound in such an instance. "Were you sent to the principal's office?" "No," Timmy said. "Come sit with me," Harriet said as she sat down on the sofa and indicated the spot next to her. "Whatever has made you so upset?" Timmy sat down next to her, then got up and got a few tissues and came back. He blew his nose. "I have to say something. I guess it's sort of a confession." "A confession?" Harriet said soothingly. She knew what was coming. It had to be very hard for Timmy, and it was definitely going to be hard on herself. Timmy looked at his mom. His face was so distraught Harriet wondered if her leaving it up to him to broach this subject had been a good idea after all. "You won't tell anyone?" Timmy said. "Of course not, honey," Harriet said. "Confessions are private." Timmy hesitated a moment and then said, I went in your bedroom a couple of times when you weren't home. Timmy fell silent and Harriet wondered if that was going to be it, but just as she was about to ask him if that was the confession, he said, I opened your drawer. Which drawer? Harriet asked. The one in the dresser, where you keep. His voice had gotten husky and he began to cry. Where I keep what? Harriet said. She had decided to play as dumb as possible. You know your lady stuff. You mean my blouses? She kept them in the bottom drawer of the dresser. I mean where you keep your underwear. The last part of the sentence was barely audible. You mean you looked in my underwear drawer where I keep my bras and panties? Timmy shook his head up and down and through his tears said, Yeah, but I also touched your stuff. Touched? Put some on. You wore my bra and panties? Yeah, Timmy said and lapsed into a crying fit. Why are you telling me this? Because, Aunt Ruth. Aunt Ruth? What has she got to do with this? Mom. She caught me doing the same thing at her house and she said, Wait a minute, Harriet said. The same thing? Yeah, I was wearing her bra and panties and she came home early and... She told you to confess what you had done? Well, actually, I told her that I had worn your bra and panties too. And she said that I wouldn't have to confess if I promised I would never do it again. So you did do it again? No, I didn't, but Mommy. Timmy started to cry with large upheavals of air coming and going from his lungs. Calm down, Harriet said, and she put her hand on his slight shoulders and pulled him toward her so his head was in her lap. She looked down at him as he struggled to regain control of himself. It was so hard to find oneself, she thought. What can a parent do? It was something everyone had to do for themselves. You need to tell me why you wore my and your aunt's bras and panties. There was a long moment of silence and she felt Timmy's breathing becoming more regular. He was a very attractive child and maybe she had never noticed that he did have some feminine traits. His skin was soft and delicate like a girl and of course the silky smoothness of his straight blonde hair. His arms were also thin and undeveloped like that of a girl. Finally Timmy said, Mommy? Yes? Do you think that God could make a mistake? Harriet felt a wave of tears hit her own eyes. What kind of mistake? She asked. Maybe there was a little girl that he was creating and then by accident she ended up being a boy? With all her self-control not to break down, Harriet said, Is that little girl you? Yes, Mommy. Harriet stroked his head and she let some tears come down her own cheeks. I guess God could make a mistake, but maybe it's just that God makes some people very special. People that can be both girls and boys at the same time. She could sense that Timmy was thinking intensely about what she had said. How can someone be both a girl and a boy? He said. When you put on my bra and panty, did you feel like a girl? Yes. Mommy, I also wore your slip and your dress. Your pink dress and they made you feel like a girl. They make me feel happy. They make me feel like I don't know. It's just that I know I want to feel that way all the time. I don't want to be a boy. Is it you don't want to be a boy or is it that you want to be a girl? I think it's that I feel I am a girl and that's why I don't want to be a boy. I don't want to look like a boy since I don't think I am one. Harriet felt exhausted. Where should she go from here? It was not obvious to her. Can she condone this, and even if she did, how much must she be a part of Timmy's life? After a while her mind cleared a bit and she said, You've not yet told me why you're confessing. If you haven't done it again, why confess? I promised Aunt Ruth that if I wanted to wear a bra again that I should confess. I mean, I promised that I'll never sneak into your clothes again, but I want to wear a bra. So what can I do? He turned on his back and was looking up at Harriet. She looked down at him. She had all the power right now. His fate hung on what she decided to do. She hadn't held him in this position since she last breastfed him. It had been a wonderful pregnancy and she had loved being a new mother. The connection she had felt as Timmy suckled her was some of the happiest times of her life. From time to time she wondered if maybe she would have preferred having a girl, if just for the reason that they could have intimate talks about girl stuff. She had even thought sometimes that John would always have a slight advantage over her, since there would be times when he and Timmy could have man-to-man talks that she could not be part of. But now Timmy had upended the cart. Should she force him to be a boy, or should she help him to be a girl? Could she force him to be a boy even if she wanted to? So the problem is that you won't sneak into my room anymore, but you still want to wear my bras and panties? It doesn't have to be yours. You just want to wear bras and panties. It doesn't matter whose they are. I feel like a girl, mommy, and if I can dress like a girl then I'll feel better. She stroked his forehead. How tortured he must be inside that he risked everything by confessing. I need time to think about this. You know your dad has to be involved in this. Don't tell Dad. Timmy cried out with fear and sat up. How can I not tell him? You promised that you wouldn't tell anyone about this. Yes, I won't, but it's a separate issue as to whether or not you can wear girls' clothes here. You're asking me to approve that without your father knowing about it. Is that fair to your father? Then I won't do it, Mom, so you won't have to ask him. Of course, she wasn't really planning on telling John, and that was one of the biggest parts of her dilemma. It was easier to go along with Timmy and give him a bra than to let John in on the secret, even though she hated the idea of having a marriage where she kept secrets from her husband. Either way, she figured John would get hurt. Perhaps there was less pain involved in the long run if she kept him in the dark. Timmy was her son, her own flesh and blood, and why should he suffer needlessly for something as silly as a bra? It seemed wrong to her. I'm not planning to talk to your dad, but I need some time to think about this little talk. You'll have to wait for an answer. I'm sorry. Timmy looked confused. It wasn't what he was expecting. He lived in a world of instant gratification. He felt tears coming on again. Harriet said, "The good news is that I haven't said no, so you might as well not be sad." "Okay, Mommy, thank you," Timmy said. "You don't have to thank me," Harriet said. A few days later, Harriet met Ruth for lunch and related to her what had happened. "What should I do?" she asked Ruth. "Whether or not you should aid and abet the enemy?" "Exactly, as well as risk John's eternal anger at me and maybe Timmy." "I've done some reading about this," Ruth said, "and I think it's true that Timmy will for the rest of his life long to be a girl. It's never going to go away. So that's a reality that I think helps ease the problem." "How so?" "It seems like it means that there is no way out. What I mean is that it doesn't matter if you give Timmy access to bras or not. He's going to always want them. He won't want them more or less because you gave him one. It's like worrying about whether or not morphine can turn the terminally ill into addicts." "That's a ghastly analogy, Ruth, but I see your point. If I help make Timmy happier, that's the only effect of my helping him. I haven't really corrupted him." "Exactly my way of thinking. And it provides some cover against John if he ever finds out about it. But John will believe that it's just a matter of self-control for Timmy. You can tell John that you couldn't stand the thought that he would think less of his son, so you kept it from him knowing that it was futile to prevent it. John will still get mad. Your fallback position is that you love them both very much and you did the one thing that was sure to keep them both loving you. If you told John, his reaction to Timmy would cause you to think less of him besides causing Timmy to think less of both of you. So it's win-win versus lose-lose. Take your pick. John will be mad because he'll think that he could have changed Timmy. But you'll be able to point out how happy Timmy has been with the freedom to dress like a girl, besides the fact that John hadn't even been suspicious it was going on. What would I do without you, Ruth? That's what sisters are for. I love Timmy also, and I love you, and I sincerely think that it's also best for John." "Okay. What kind of clothes should I get for Timmy?" "It's probably best if you work that out with Timmy," Ruth said. "I'm sure you're right." The next opportunity to be alone with Timmy, Harriet gave him her answer. I've had some time to think about your confession and I've decided that I'm not going to stop you from pretending to be a girl if that's what you want. Timmy, who had looked terribly nervous, broke out into a big smile and hugged his mother. There are some important rules, however. First and foremost is that you must never ever dress as a girl with your father in the house, or about to come home, or any other circumstance where he could catch you. Timmy nodded his head up and down excitedly. The second condition is that you can only dress like a girl in the house. Never outside. Thank you, Mom. Do you agree to the conditions? Yes, Mommy. I'll never dress as a girl when Daddy is home or about to come home, and I'll never dress as a girl outside the house. Good. So this is how it's going to be. We'll sit down at the computer and we'll do some shopping online and have the clothes sent here. When they arrive, you'll keep them hidden in your room. Timmy started to cry with joy and buried his face in his mom's neck and held her as tightly as he could. We'll keep your girl clothes in the old trunk in the back of your closet and pretend, if anybody else should open it and ask why there are girls' clothes inside, that the clothes were left there for us to hold by Mrs. Milbauer, your nursery school teacher, but she never came to get them. Timmy looked so blissful. Harriet felt increasingly confident that she was doing the right thing. When can we pick out some clothes? Timmy asked. How about right now? Harriet said, and she fetched her laptop computer and brought it to where they were sitting. I wonder what a good site is for girls' clothes, Timmy asked. How about we look around at JCPenney? They have a good selection, and we've bought you jeans there before. Timmy put his thin arms around his mom and hugged her. Harriet felt a joy in her heart as powerful as the day Timmy was born. In some ways, this afternoon marked a second birth for Timmy. He could be counted upon to ever more deeply enter into his girl self, and as he did so, Harriet would acquire a daughter. As they waited for the machine to power up and make the wireless connection, she also felt a sudden sense of foreboding. Perhaps she was crazy for not remembering first and foremost that this plan was terribly fraught with danger. Timmy might get caught by his dad wearing girls' clothes, or he might accidentally act the part of a girl in front of his dad. She would have to be ever vigilant, a thought that made her question the folly of what she was about to do. When the JCPenney website came up, Harriet said, "Let's see where we should look." On the top they saw women lingerie juniors and to the right kids plus baby. Harriet said, "I'm looking for girls." "You're too young for juniors, so I suppose it must be in kids plus baby." Timmy looked on with complete absorption. Harriet clicked on Kids Plus Baby and saw on the left girls' clothing and clicked on that. Some pictures of different categories of clothes came up that gave them a choice of directions to go. Timmy saw that one of them said dresses and had a picture of a bright pink dress. He couldn't wait to see if his mom would buy that dress for him. "Let's start with underwear," his mother said, and she clicked on an icon of some gaily colored panties. Icons of bras, panties, and socks came up. "We might as well first start with bras," she said, and she clicked on bras. Timmy was in a state of ecstasy when he saw the selection that appeared. The first was called Maidenform 2-pack beginner bras for $12. They were pink and white, and Timmy reflexively squeezed his mother's arm when she said, "Oh, these are very pretty. Would you like a package of these bras?" "Yes, Mom," he said. "We need to decide on a size." "How do you do that, Mom?" "I'll get a tape measure and see how big you are around the chest," Harriet said, and got up and went to get one from her sewing kit. Timmy looked at the other choices for bras. One of them looked to be for older girls. Anyway, it looked like the bra he had worn at Aunt Ruth's house. It was called Maidenform 1 Fab Fit Bra. When Harriet came back, she had Timmy take off his shirt. She then encircled his chest with the tape measure and read off 29.5 inches. "That means that your bra strap size would be 30. 30? Timmy said. "You always round up to the next even number. Like I'm a 36, but if you measured me I'd be a 35 or so." Harriet was enjoying herself, and she made a mental note to tell Ruth about this experience when she got the chance. Talking to Timmy about bras reminded her of the kind of conversation she would have wished to have had with a daughter, if she had had one. Harriet clicked on size and selected 30. Below that was a button to select a color that revealed there was a choice between white and white or pink and white. How about the pink and white bra? It's a little bit prettier, she said. Okay, Timmy said. It's so funny, they don't even ask for a cup size. It's just 30, since they know girls wearing a beginner bra don't really have a cup size. Timmy looked confused and Harriet explained, it's not just the distance around the chest, it's also the size of the you-know-whats that go inside the bra. The cup size reflects how big they are. A is the smallest cup usually, then there is B and C and even larger ones for the really big girls. Like here, you see this other bra, she said, indicating the Maidenform 1 FabFit bra, and she clicked on that. See, if we click on 30 for the size, then it asks us to enter a cup size. Here, it shows only the 1 cup size A since this bra is really just for young girls. They don't even make it in larger cup sizes. Timmy was looking at it with such intensity that Harriet said, "Would you like one of these too?" "Can I?" Timmy said. "Sure, dear, but we have to choose a color for it, black, nude, pink or white." "What do you think I should get?" Timmy asked. "How about we just get you a white one and a pink one?" "Great, Mom," Timmy said appreciatively. "So we'll have 4 bras altogether, and now we'll look at panties." Harriet's mind raced along imagining what her relationship with Timmy would be like once his girl clothes arrived. She would definitely have to make sure to teach Timmy how to put on a bra and whatever other basic girl knowledge he ought to know. Harriet sent the browser back to the screen listing bras, panties and socks and clicked on panties this time. Several different styles appeared. Each of these came as packages of 5 panties and without asking Timmy clicked on the one that said it was bikini style. A picture of 5 gaily colored panties appeared. "These seem nice, don't they?" Harriet asked. "They're very pretty," Timmy said, "and isn't it so cool that they come in so many colors?" "I guess that's true. Your boy underwear has been white, but girls often like to have lots of different colored panties. Anyway, the bikini cut is probably the nicest for you and we'll stick to that." Timmy looked at the other pictures and said, "What about hipsters? I find them to be cut too low and kind of uncomfortable. I don't know, maybe later on we'll branch out." "Okay, Mom," Timmy said. Now we journey over to the socks department. They proceeded to weave a path through the website buying socks, some skirts and tops and sandals. There were some nice dresses, but Harriet didn't sense they were exactly what Timmy had in mind, so she suggested they try a different website for them. They went to the JCPenney checkout and ordered the clothing. Everything was in stock and in a week they could expect it to show up at the door. "Had enough for today?" Harriet asked. "No," Timmy exclaimed, "I'm happy to look at more dresses." "Okay, we might as well spend a bit more time, then you had better start your homework." They cruised around on the internet searching under the keywords girls' dresses and came up with a nice website where they decided on buying a pretty light pink organza over tulle, T-length dress with a full skirt and cap sleeves. In the back there was a satin bow, streamers and applique trim. Half the fun for Harriet was watching Timmy's eyes, the size of saucers as he carefully examined each dress that they saw. She was sure that she heard him gulp with excitement when he first saw the one that they finally picked. The last thing they searched for and ordered was some tights that he could wear with his dress and skirts. Harriet had to admit to herself that she had thoroughly enjoyed the experience. She truly was gaining the daughter she had never had. How many moms out there had the fun of shopping with their daughters, discussing which bra or skirt to buy, an experience she had never had, and so completely unlike buying clothes for a son. Of course, facing the reality of seeing her son dressed as a girl was another huge hurdle that she would have to leap over in a matter of a week or 2. For the moment, however, she treasured the memory of sitting side by side with Timmy peering at the girl's clothes, and she would get to relive it in detail when she told Ruth about it the next day. The day the packages of clothes arrived, Harriet was at home and Timmy was at school. She had been unsure of how she would feel when she first looked upon the girl's clothes she had bought for Timmy, but she found herself pleasantly surprised, even happy that she had managed to get him such a pretty collection of things. Some lingering doubts about the wisdom of what she had done began creeping into her mind the closer it got to the time when Timmy would be coming home from school. The reality of having her son wearing girls' clothes and behaving like she had seen from her spy camera was sinking in, and she began worrying herself sick. She would have to take the blame for having allowed him to pursue his obsession, and she could imagine John yelling at her, "How could you not have known better? Turning our son into a girl? What terrible judgment you have. I'll never forgive you for that." Suddenly nervous, Harriet thought that she should hide the clothes from Timmy. In fact, it was not too late to call the whole thing off. She had merely to tell John about Timmy's confession, and then all would be over for better or worse. She called Ruth at work and told her that the clothes had arrived. The pretty dress with the organza and tulle was just totally precious. There was a cute built in starched crinoline that puffed out the skirt. It would be incredibly darling. But every time I think of Timmy wearing that, I get cold feet. Do you think I'm doing the right thing, Ruth? Just keep focusing on the alternative, Ruth said. Sometimes a person has to pick between two tough choices, and I think we've made the right one. You know, in time, I hope that becomes clearer and clearer, even if now the reality of what you're doing seems scary. I hope you're right. I guess I'll give him the clothes and we'll hope for the best. Call me tonight if you can and let me know how it went. I'll try. As he had done every day since he and his mom had ordered the clothes, Timmy ran home from school to see if they had arrived. Harriet greeted him at the door, and by the smile on her face he knew that they were there. "Oh, Mom, I'm so happy," he exclaimed, panting for breath. Harriet had spread the clothes out on his bed, and when he came up to his room he looked at each and every package one by one. He held up the organza dress and said, "It's so much prettier than I imagined. Can I try it on?" "Well, you know the rules. You've got a couple of hours now until your dad comes home, so go ahead and wear the clothes. That's why we bought them." "Thanks, Mom. If you have any questions, I'll be in the living room. You can also come down and give me a fashion show if you want." Timmy laughed and then said, "There is just one thing I don't understand too well." "What's that?" "I'm not so sure I know about how to put on an He pointed to the package of bras. "Bras?" "Yes, I suppose you wouldn't know how to do it. Shall I help you?" "Would you, Mommy?" "Sure, take off your top," Harriet said, and waited while Timmy took it off. She opened the package of beginner bras and took one out and handed it to Timmy. "It's best if I just tell you how to do it while you put it on yourself," and Harriet proceeded to lead him through the technique she used herself. "Look for the little ribbon on the front of the bra and then hold up the bra in your right hand by its left end." Timmy was so confused as to which was the left and right ends that Harriet finally had to stand behind him and guide his hands. "If all mothers have to go through such an effort with their daughters, it's a miracle any girls wear bras at all," she laughed. Timmy smiled, seeing that she was just playing with him. Harriet continued, "Now reach behind your back with your left hand and catch the right end of the bra." Timmy twirled around 3 times until he finally caught the end, and Harriet roared with laughter. She could barely control herself enough to say, "Bring your 2 hands together in front of your belly and clip them together." "Very good. Now you can swivel the cups around to the front and lift up the bra, putting your hands inside the straps on the left and right sides." "Excellent." Timmy now seemed to be getting the idea of what he was doing. "The last thing is to make sure that your breasts are caught comfortably in the cups." She was tempted to show Timmy what that looked like in her own case, since his cups lay flat on his small chest. However, on second thought, she wasn't sure it was such a good idea to undress in front of her son and discuss with him how she filled out her bra. She remembered that Ruth had told her how Timmy had said that his original inspiration for cross-dressing came from seeing her in her underwear. The last thing she wanted to do was give him any more ideas. Despite the absence of breasts, Timmy made a serious attempt at capturing his own non-existent breasts. This time the effect was perhaps a bit more sad than comical, and Harriet said, "Very good, Timmy. I think you'll have no trouble putting on your bras from now on." With the pretty bra on correctly, Timmy ran to a mirror to look at himself. "It's so pretty, Mommy. I love it. It'll be easier to get on with practice," she said. A first big milestone in the life of her new daughter, she thought, wearing her very first bra. She thought back to when she got her own first bra and tried to remember if her mother, Timmy's grandmother, had been excited about it. She couldn't remember one way or the other. She had been so focused on her own happiness of having passed through that transition into adolescence. "I'm going to first try on my dress," Timmy said. "First put on some panties," Harriet said. "I know, Mom," Timmy said, blushing and indicating that she should leave the room so he could change. "Okay, dear, but I'm going to have to help you with the dress." "It's got a back zip," Harriet said, and she picked up the dress, unzipped the zipper and showed it to Timmy. "You'll have to put it on over your head and then I'll zip it up for you. Come to me when you're ready." Harriet left Timmy to himself and she went downstairs. So far so good, she thought. It seemed like such innocent play for Timmy and he was so happy. She smiled again at the remembrance of him struggling with the bra. She would make a point of describing that to Ruth. A few minutes later, Timmy came down to the living room wearing his organza over tulle party dress. "I put on some panties and the tights," Timmy said. "I see," Harriet said, trying to sound positive. The little stiff skirt stood out around him and Harriet saw that he had also put on his low-heeled shoes. She got up and zipped him fully into the dress and said, "Why, just look at you, Timmy, it fits like a charm. One would think it was just made for you." "I love it, Mom," Timmy said, and he walked slowly about the living room with a dainty gentleness. Things inside him were opening up, some inner need that came out into the open once he looked the part of a young, pretty girl. Harriet felt a twinge of worry. Would it be hard for Timmy to transition back to his usual self when his dad came home? Or in school the next day? "I hope you'll be able to be yourself when your dad gets home," Harriet said, and then realized that yourself could be interpreted either way. "I mean your boy self," she corrected herself. "Sure, Mommy, I promised you I would and I will. I don't want Daddy to know about this." Harriet smiled. It was a relief. Timmy and she were on the same page. That night she called up Ruth. "You can't believe how precious our little princess of organza and tulle looks," Harriet gushed. "He's like a little doll. More delicate and girly than you or I ever were." Ruth laughed. "And everything fits?" "Yes, pretty well, really. It's remarkable. He showed me a few outfits. The shorts, skirts and tops all are lovely." "What about the bras?" "I was going to tell you. He asked me to help him on with it and I tried to teach him. It was so cute and funny. We both were laughing. I can't wait to see him. John will be traveling on business in 3 weeks. He'll be gone a week and you'll have to come over, that is, assuming that Timmy has no objection." The days went by one with Timmy spending a couple of hours each afternoon after school dressed in his pretty clothes. At first he favored the party dress, but as time went on he branched out to experiment dressing in a skirt and matching top. He became an expert at putting on bras and stockings. A couple of times Harriet surprised him with little gifts. One time it was pantyhose and another it was a slip. One day she came home with a pink leotard, stockings, ballet slippers, and a cute little tutu. "I saw it in the shop window, and I couldn't resist buying it for you. It's so darling," she told him. For the next few days Timmy flitted around the house as a little ballerina. After the excitement of the first week, Harriet noticed that Timmy would come home from school, choose an outfit and then get absorbed in his homework. It was as if he was defining normalcy in his life as being a girl. During the 2 hours that he was dressed up, if Harriet talked to him, Timmy seemed like a girl to her. It was a remarkable if subtle transformation, and it was not what Harriet had expected. She thought she would always be looking at a boy play acting the part of a girl, but it did not seem that way at all. Harriet kept Ruth in the loop as much as possible about how Timmy was progressing in the role of her daughter. She purposefully didn't tell Timmy about his father's upcoming trip since she suspected that it would be hard for him to contain his excitement and he would act strange in front of his dad. A few days before the trip, however, John talked about it at dinner and Harriet could see Timmy's excitement and she signaled to him with her eyes that he had better be careful not to make his dad think that he was anxious for him to leave on his trip. Finally, on a Saturday morning, Harriet drove John to the airport with Timmy coming along for the ride. The moment his dad said his goodbyes and was gone, Timmy and his mom exchanged glances. They both understood that this presented new opportunities for Timmy. Harriet felt like she ought to try and rein him in somehow, but she knew deep inside that it would be hopeless. The horse was out of the barn and not likely to willingly go back in again. "Your Aunt Ruth will be coming this afternoon for a visit," Harriet said. "Oh, does that mean I have to be a boy?" Timmy said, sounding a bit deflated. "Actually, it's up to you. Your aunt did see you wearing her underwear, so I guess she wouldn't be too surprised if she saw you dressed as a girl today." "I won't mind," Timmy said, and Harriet thought to herself, "Mark me surprised. Can I mention it to her before she comes over so she won't be shocked?" "Sure," Timmy said, but what? "But I wanted to wear my pretty white and pink dress today." "Maybe she won't like that." If only Timmy knew how much Ruth wanted to see him like that. "Don't worry. You look darling in that dress and I think Ruth will agree with me." Harriet glanced over at Timmy. He was smiling and happy. This was going to be an enchanted week. When they got back home from the airport, Timmy made a beeline to his room and took out the clothes he had been planning to wear for this special day: his 38-cup bra, panties, pantyhose, his slip and his organza over-tulle dress. Now that he knew that Aunt Ruth was coming, he was more anxious than ever that he look his prettiest. It would be his way of trying to explain to her why his claim that he would never wear girls' clothes again had been wrong. He wanted to convince her that it didn't make sense for someone who felt as entirely feminine as he did should not dress as a girl. When he was fully dressed, he stood looking at himself in the large mirror over his dresser. He still couldn't get over how much he loved the organza dress. He turned sideways and looked at his profile. Though it was nice to have a bra on that made a slight outward thrust over his chest, it would be a lot nicer to have a more definite figure. Also, the time had come when he ought to wear some makeup. He went to his mom, who was busy in the kitchen, and said, "Can I put some panties in my bra to fill out the cups?" His mother looked at him and stopped herself from saying any of the obvious objections, that it was silly and unnecessary. Clearly Timmy would want breasts like any young girl would. She hadn't thought about it before, but perhaps she would have to order him a couple of padded bras. "Sure, I guess it's okay. Thanks, Mom," Timmy said. Instead of rushing off, he stood where he was and finally said, "Since it's a special occasion, can you put some lipstick on me and maybe make my eyes pretty like you do when you go out?" "Makeup?" Harriet asked. "Golly, Timmy, you're racing right along here. I haven't thought about it." "Please, Mommy," he said. "Well, I guess it's okay. Give me a minute to finish what I'm doing and I'll help you." A short while later, Harriet and Timmy were sitting together in front of the mirror on her dressing table. Timmy sat with his legs crossed, wearing just his slip and pantyhose since Harriet had made him take off his dress so that it wouldn't accidentally get any makeup on it. He had stuffed a folded-up panty in each of his bra cups and he made a point of sitting up straight as if showing off his newfound chest to the world. Timmy looked at his mother with complete fascination and interest as she discussed some of the basics of makeup with him. As a parent, Harriet felt that it was nice to be in a position where your kid really listened carefully to what you were saying. It was so rare these days, and Harriet was fully enjoying the moment. She gave Timmy an extensive lecture about foundation and rouge, about mascara and eyeshadow and how to apply it. She gave Timmy a chance to first put it on himself and then she intervened to help him do it right. The last thing was lipstick and she had him pick a color from her collection. Not surprising, he picked the brightest red she had. It proved to be too difficult for him to get it on correctly and she ended up doing most of the job herself. You'll have to learn by trial and error like all girls do. Keep on practicing and you'll figure out a technique that you'll be comfortable with. I will, Mommy, Timmy said. You're going to need some nail polish, too. I suppose a red that matches your lipstick? Oh goody, Mommy. Harriet smiled. Yes, some nice bright red nail polish for you. She found the polish and carefully applied it to Timmy's small fingernails. Then they waited for the polish to dry. You see how hard it is for a girl to get ready for an occasion? See how much time it takes, Harriet said. She's got all this makeup and grooming to do. Waiting for polish to dry. I don't mind. I loved putting on the makeup and I think it's so beautiful to have pretty nail polish. A girl also has to worry so much more about what clothes she'll wear. Boys can just put on any old clothes and just go. But a girl! You have to decide on which bra you'll wear, beside your panties. Should they match or not? Then you have to put on the bra, which takes time. And what about wearing dresses? You have to decide which one, what slip to wear, whether you need a crinoline or not, or stockings. It's so complicated, Harriet said in an exaggerated, teasing voice. Mom, you're silly, Timmy said. Girls wear bras. We just have to, so it doesn't matter if boys don't. And dresses make us feel pretty. Boys can't feel pretty. Harriet could see that Timmy didn't even really see himself as a boy anymore. So what do you feel like at school when you're dressed like a boy? Sometimes I have to put boys' clothes on, but I don't think that makes me a boy. If I'm a girl, how can I ever feel like a boy? This conversation was making Harriet dizzy. What was she hoping that he'd say? That he was still in some sense a boy who likes to dress like a girl? But that wasn't him anymore. He now was a girl who dressed like a boy when it was expected of him. It seemed to her that this was more dangerous for Timmy's future than being a boy who wanted to dress like a girl. When the polish was finally dry, Harriet carefully helped him on with the dress and then zipped up the back. She took a good look at him, got her hairbrush and brushed his long hair a bit. I dare say you look like my daughter. A very pretty young lady all dressed up for a party. There is only one thing missing. Harriet picked up a bottle of Escada perfume and said, Do you want to smell pretty? Timmy shook his head up and down vigorously and she gave him a couple of spritzes on his neck. It's so wonderful, he exclaimed and took a deep sniff of the lovely scent. Just then the doorbell rang. It must be Ruth, Harriet said. You give us 5 minutes and then come down and make your grand entrance. We'll see if Ruth recognizes you. Harriet and Ruth were sitting on the sofa in the living room when Timmy came walking in made up beautifully in his pretty dress. He walked with grace like a young debutante. Ruth literally gasped with surprise when she saw the precious young boy in front of her looking and behaving in every detail like a young girl. My word, Timmy, you are the most precious young thing. You so outgirl any girl I've ever known. Timmy giggled with excitement and walked over to Ruth, put his delicate arms around her neck and gave her a hug. His dress pushed into her and fell over her lap. Would you look at that dress, Ruth said. Stand back there and let me get a good look. Timmy backed away primly, then stopped, gathered a bit of his skirts in each hand and did a curtsy. Ruth laughed and said, Twirl around for me, and Timmy gracefully pirouetted around laughing and spinning. My God, Harriet, he's so gorgeous and prettily made up with the lipstick and perfume. Come sit here between us, Ruth said, and Timmy gracefully sat down on the sofa between the two women. His organza over tulle skirts bunched up around him and onto the laps of the ladies. I want to hear everything that's been happening to you since you stayed with me. I did what you said, Aunt Ruth. I asked my mom if I could dress up and she said I could. Timmy leaned over toward his mom and gave her a kiss on the cheek. And you've come such a long way since then. I mean, you've become so polished, and I don't just mean your nails. I love being a girl, Timmy said. I wish I could be a girl all the time. Harriet and Ruth exchanged glances. There were painful times coming, even if this day was perfect. "What are we going to do today?" Ruth asked with enthusiasm. "There's a matinee today at the concert hall. It's the Joffrey Ballet." "Timmy can't leave the house like this," Harriet said, even if no one could figure out his secret. "It's one of our rules." "I'm sorry," Ruth said. "I wasn't thinking." "You're right, we'll stay right here and do some girl things." Timmy nodded his head excitedly. That was what he had wanted for the longest time, to spend the day doing girls' things. By the end of the week, Timmy had spent every available minute dressed as a girl. As the time neared the end and they would have to drive to the airport to fetch his dad, Timmy had to fight back tears and Harriet had to fight an overwhelming sense of dread. The cat was really out of the bag now, and Timmy was destined to be a girl, one way or the other. Somehow, someway, John was going to have to be brought on board. The most urgent problem was that she was sure that Timmy would not be able to keep his feminine movements in check around John. He had blossomed so fully as a girl around her and Ruth that neither of them saw him as a boy any longer. He was one of them, he was a girl for all intents and purposes. And now Harriet found herself on the side of forcing her daughter to pretend to be a son for her husband. This could not go anywhere except to disaster. From the moment they greeted John, Timmy bravely and almost heroically, Harriet thought, attempted to be as boylike as possible. His actions seemed to be proficient enough that John didn't give any hint that he thought that something was askew. For the next week Harriet watched Timmy shift back and forth between boy and girl. One moment with his dad a boy, the next moment out of John's sight a girl. It broke her heart to see him in two pieces like this. She couldn't imagine that he could keep it up without mishap. And what would happen if he could maintain the deception? At some point there would be the inevitable onset of puberty with his body changing into that of a man. How could he even begin to express his girl's side at that point? It was clear to Harriet that even if Timmy didn't slip up and reveal his femininity to his dad, she should still tell John about it so that they could intervene to get Timmy real help, psychological or medical, before anything really bad happened to him. Harriet arranged to have lunch with Ruth to tell her of her decision to tell John about Timmy. She felt that there was maybe 6 months to a year before Timmy would seriously enter adolescence and she wanted to have a plan in place to deal with it. They discussed what, if anything, they could do. "I just read where some parents give boys like Timmy hormones so he never does become a man. Enough estrogen and his voice won't change, he won't grow a beard, and he'll even grow some small boobs. Then later he could have sex reassignment surgery and perhaps live a normal life as a woman, well, except for being infertile. So in other words, I'll have to talk to John and get him to agree with me that we should be proactive in turning Timmy into a girl." Well, it's not that bleak. I mean, we think he already is a girl. We're not turning him into one. The point is that it's got to be worse for Timmy to experience puberty as a boy than to keep him a girl. Won't that be emotionally destructive to him? I agree, but at what point can we act like God in a sense? You've probably got to get one or more shrinks behind you. If they agree, then you could go to John. I'll need to get John involved before we send Timmy to a shrink. He's got to know about the cost. I could pay it, Ruth offered. No, I won't hear of it. The biggest problem right now is John not knowing. Whether he agrees to hormone treatment or fights against it, either way he has to know. I'm going to have the dreaded conversation with him. It terrifies me, because I love him and don't want to lose him, but I also love Timmy and don't want him to live in agony. I suppose you're right, Ruth said. You know I'll be there for you in whatever way I can. 2 weeks after John had come back from his business trip, at dinner, Ruth watched in horror as Timmy completely forget to act like a boy. It wasn't even close. It was as if he was a little Shirley Temple, it seemed to Harriet. She saw a bewildered look on John's face and then watched as he was about to say something but then thought better of it. Suddenly he looked at Harriet with a questioning look and Harriet looked away. "What's going on, Timmy?" John said. The sound of his father's voice shocked Timmy into behaving like a boy. "What do you mean, Dad?" he said. A moment ago you were sort of acting as if you were a girl. Timmy gave a forced laugh. A girl? Yes, a girl. Actually, I'm not so sure this is the first time I've seen this in you. I'm a boy, Dad. I guess I was just daydreaming or something. Who daydreams and acts like a girl? Timmy shrugged his shoulders and his dad said, "What do you think, Harriet?" I didn't notice, Harriet said unconvincingly. Timmy and I need to have a talk after dinner, John said. I think there's something going on here that I don't know about. Maybe you and I need to talk first, Harriet said, seeing that the best course of action was to not be deceptive. Why would that be? John asked. His voice sounded a bit aggressive and threatening. Look, Timmy, you just better go to your room, Harriet said, and before John could react she said, I really mean it, John. It's best if you and I first have a conversation. Now Harriet saw a range of emotions surging through John's face. Fear, anger, incredulity. Timmy got up, leaving the food on his plate, and went up to his bedroom. There was complete silence and Harriet said, John, we have a problem with Timmy. I've known about it for a few months now. I didn't tell you because I feel like I'm caught in the middle. I love both of you madly. What's the problem, Harriet? John said angrily. Your son believes he's a girl. That's such bull. John said sharply, cutting her off, but Harriet raised her voice and said, cutting him off, before you start reacting you need to listen and listen carefully. This is not just something a little bit of macho threats is going to cure. Your son is a girl. His temperament, his soul, everything about him. He doesn't even see himself as a boy, so no amount of screaming will make him one. You mean behind my back you turned him into a girl, and then you expect me to believe this BS about him being one? Turn him into a girl? Are you crazy? Nothing about this was my idea in the first case. It all started with Timmy. He came to me one day and asked me if I thought that God makes mistakes, because he knew that he was a girl so he couldn't understand why he had a boy's body. Harriet was glad for the opportunity to play this card and she hoped it might help to soften John's reaction. When he told you that, why didn't you tell me? Like I said, Timmy was afraid for you to know and he had made me promise not to tell you. I guess you only know now because it's become impossible for him to completely hold back his acting who he truly is. He was afraid because man to man he would know that I could see beyond his BS. Really now, and what would be the reason why Timmy would pretend to want to be a girl? To just get you angry for the fun of it? There was silence for a few minutes and then Harriet said, John, honey, I never wanted this to happen. But when it did, I think I did the only thing I could do, so please don't be mad at me, and don't be angry with Timmy. He's going to have a much harder life because of this than we can imagine. John looked like he was far from convinced, but at least he wasn't throwing things or punching the walls. Considering that he had had no time to reflect about it, it looked like he was doing okay. I'm going upstairs to talk to Timmy, John said. Be gentle, Harriet said, and John gave her an unpleasant look. This isn't the end of our conversation. John sat facing Timmy in his room. A girl? All of a sudden you're a girl? Timmy regarded the solid masculinity of his dad with fear and shame. I'm sorry, Dad. Is it something at school? Bullies bothering you? No, Dad. I just know I'm not a boy. Since when? Well, I first sort of felt girlish feelings as far back as I remember, but it sort of came definitely into my mind last year. Nonsense, John said. But when I knew, I knew. Then I started asking God why he made me look like a boy and could he make me a girl. And what did he say? He never answered my wish. Maybe God doesn't care about me. Maybe God is telling you that he didn't make a mistake and it's up to you to accept what he wants. I thought of that, Dad, but then I realized that God made my mind too and he made that of a girl. So he made my body a boy but my mind a girl. Only I like looking like a girl and I wish I could all the time. When have you been looking like a girl? I meant to say that I wanted to look like a girl. Have you worn any of your mom's clothes? Timmy nodded his head. Does she know about it? Yes, Daddy, I confessed that to her. And then what happened? I stopped wearing them. Do you have other girls' clothes? There was a long silence which John construed as meaning yes. And did your mother get these for you? Timmy started to cry. Where are the clothes? John said. Timmy pointed to the trunk. Stay in your room, I'll deal with you later. Without opening it up, John picked up the trunk and carried it out of the room, downstairs and into the garage. Timmy lay on his bed crying. My God, Harriet, you bought him girls' clothes? If you could see the happiness. Well, he's seen the last of them. What? You took his clothes? He won't need them anymore. His organza dress? Jesus Christ, Harriet, get with the program. Organza dress? I think any judge will give me custody once they hear about this. You're going to kill him. I don't believe it. And what crazy thing are you saying? You're going to divorce me over this? Harriet started tearing up. I won't if you give up your ridiculous enabling of his perverted behavior. You have to end this ridiculous farce of indulging him in this sex fantasy of his. Sex fantasy? Yes. That's all we're talking about here, a prepubescent sex fantasy. Lots of men get off on wearing women's clothes. He's welcome to go back to it when he goes to college, but as long as he lives here, he's going to be a boy. I'm not going to allow you to harm him. You're being completely unreasonable and you have no right to just dictate what's going to happen here. Oh, and what have you been doing for months? I've been doing what Timmy wants. Allowing him to be himself and be happy and not be what I or you or anyone else wants him to be. You have a parental responsibility. Yes, and in this case the hard choice, but the right one is to not deny him who he is. Harriet could see that John was frustrated and angry and didn't have answers for what she was saying. There was hope that he would cool down and begin to do all the hard thinking that he needed to do. Where did you put his clothes? I'm going to start spending more time with him. Take him to ball games, do a lot of man-to-man stuff. He'll start to see that his body is no lie. You can't be serious, can you? Like that's what determines sexual identity. Going to a ball game? He'll be a son with me. You have to let him be who he is. He's allowed to be himself in this world. We both know that when he grows up he will be himself and it won't matter what you or I think. If it turns out that we were supportive, then he'll be that much a better person and he'll always include us in his life. When he grows up he can do whatever stupid thing he wants to do, but as long as I'm his parent it's my job to save him from himself, John said. He needs hormone therapy. He can't be allowed to enter pubescence. If you deny him this you'll make his adult life needlessly difficult. You have to let him be the girl he is. You're a complete wacko, Harriet. You're believing your own lies. Things went from bad to worse and before long Harriet and John were shouting at each other. Timmy cringed under the covers of his bed with his hands over his ears. After a while John came storming up the steps and into Timmy's room. He lifted him up bodily by his arm and shoved him against the wall. You're a boy, he screamed. What are you? A boy, Timmy said through a veil of tears. That's right, and you'll never touch any girl's things as long as you're my son. Harriet came running into the room and screamed at John, Get your hands off of him and get out. Get out! This last she screamed in a blood-curdling voice that even amazed herself. John glowered at her and slowly let go of Timmy. His arm showed a bruise from where John had grabbed it. John left the room, went to his bedroom and packed a suitcase of clothes. Before he left he said to Harriet, You better get the best lawyer you can afford because I'm going to skewer you in court. Turning to Timmy he said, And you better get used to the idea that you're not going to be wearing any girl's clothes anymore. With that he stormed out of the house and Harriet and Timmy heard the sound of tires screeching. Is Daddy coming back? Timmy asked. His eyes were bright red from crying. Sure, Timmy, your dad needs time to think about things. I'm sure he'll come around and eventually come back and everything will be fine. Except that he won't let me be a girl? That I don't know. But if Daddy left because of me being a girl, how can I still be a girl when he comes back? This isn't a good time to be thinking of yourself, Timmy. You've caused enough. Harriet stopped what she was going to say. Losing John was a very high price for Timmy's psychic peace. She was now really caught between a rock and a hard place. If she caved into John, her son would be a wreck, and if she didn't, her marriage was over. This wasn't what she envisioned happening. She had always felt that John would not give her up as easily as he seemed to. It was a shock, and she prayed that given a few days he would come to his senses. I'm sorry, Mommy, Timmy said. I'll never wear girls' clothes again. You can tell Daddy that so he comes home. I wish it were that simple, Timmy. I can't let you shoulder the entire weight of suffering for this family. Everyone has to give and take. Your father is a good man and he'll come back because it's his duty as a father and husband. Harriet knew that this was wishful thinking. Nothing about the way John acted was what she thought it would be. Several tense days passed and Harriet did not hear anything from John. He had stormed out of the house so fast that he had neglected to take Timmy's clothes with him, and Harriet had retrieved the trunk and returned it to Timmy's room. He, however, showed no interest in wearing them. Before he went to bed one night, when she saw that he was wearing his boy pajamas and could just have well been wearing the pretty pink gown, she queried him about it. He began to cry, and after gently prodding him was able to deduce that he blamed himself for his dad's departure, for the family's breakup. Not dressing up was the one thing he could do that might bring his dad back. You won't understand this, honey, but the issue here is not whether or not you dress up as a girl, it's whether or not your dad understands that you feel like a girl inside. Have you stopped feeling like a girl? Harriet asked. No, Mommy. Well, you might as well dress the way you want. I'm sure your dad will be coming home any day now. Timmy seemed to think about it for a minute and then said, Okay, Mommy, I will. The next day Harriet received a phone call from a lawyer. Your husband is giving you an ultimatum. You have 24 hours to declare to him in a written statement that you will no longer aid and abet the transsexual behavior of your son. If you do not agree to this, then he will proceed with a movement for a legal separation followed by divorce and total custody of your child. I have to tell you that based on the merits of this case, you will be very lucky to even get visiting rights, and even then they are likely to be supervised. Harriet hung up the phone and felt woozy. She sat down and let herself cry. After a while she decided that this had to be a bluff, a clever strategy by John to get his way and end the whole business. It was like a crazy poker bid. He must be in as much agony as she was. Their marriage had been so good, they were so in love, and how could it all come crashing down so fast? She called Ruth and told her what had transpired, and Ruth came over to be with her that night. When Timmy heard she was there, he came down to greet her. It was almost a relief to Harriet to see that he was dressed in his pretty nightgown and fluffy pink slippers. Timmy smiled when he saw Ruth and he gave her a big hug. It was the first smile Harriet had seen him make since John had left. When the ladies sat down on the sofa, Timmy crawled in to sit between them. It was close to his bedtime, and it wasn't long until he slumped over and Harriet and Ruth could hear his steady breathing. How hard has it been on him? Ruth asked. You don't want to know. He's been a brave little soldier, even willing to give up cross-dressing if it would bring John back home. If John had any idea how cruel he's been. Well, I wouldn't go that far. He's had to take in one gigantic dose of what you and I have been taking slowly over months. You're right at some level, but on another he's being ridiculous. A half-hour fight and then divorce court? Ruth said. Either he's only using this as an excuse to bail, or it's a bluff. If he just wanted to leave, he wouldn't take Timmy. You're probably right. Anyway, I know a good lawyer and you're going to have to meet with her ASAP. I know. I've thought about it and I can't cave in, but what about the threat to bar me from Timmy? That's why you had better see the lawyer. When Harriet met with her lawyer, she found out that John wasn't going to get custody of Timmy without a fight, so determined that he'd go broke trying to do it. The fact of the matter was that he'd be paying for most of Harriet's lawyer as well as his own. But is it possible he could win? Theoretically, yes. But it would be a Pyrrhic victory, wouldn't it? Timmy would not become the son he wants, and John's life would be filled with endless torment trying to suppress Timmy's urges. I imagine they will get even stronger in puberty, even if he develops male sex characteristics. The biggest danger here is that if John persists in this, there will be permanent damage to all three of you. That is a very high price to pay for very little, particularly in the modern world where people are increasingly being left alone to be themselves. In a fatalistic way, Harriet felt encouraged by the talk. Her job now was just waiting. She had Timmy for the moment, and if and when she had to go to court, she was in good hands and very likely to come out okay. Well, except that her marriage would be permanently in ruins and Timmy might have lifelong guilt that he caused the breakup. The two attorneys represented the main contact between Harriet and John. It was arranged that John would take Timmy for the weekends until such time as a permanent solution to the family's problem was found. The situation had created a great deal of awkwardness for John and Timmy in their time together. There was no thought of him wearing girls' clothes, and he tried his best to be as boyish as possible and hide his desire to be feminine. For his part, John preferred to believe that the absence of obvious female characteristics in Timmy meant that his interest in being a girl was fed by Harriet's encouragement and enabling. The first night Timmy came over to the apartment John had moved to, he and his dad sat at the kitchen table for a man-to-man talk. "I'm sorry for grabbing you, Timmy," his dad said. "Did I hurt your arm?" "It's okay, Dad," Timmy said in a quavering voice. A volcano of bottled-up emotion lay just underneath the surface of his feelings. "It must be good to get here away from all that female smothering," John said. Timmy remained silent but nodded his head. Timmy felt tears coming on and looked down at the table in front of him. "What's the matter, Timmy? You look like you've seen a ghost." The volcano erupted. Timmy got up, tears streaming down his face, and ran to his father. He put his arms around his thick neck. John had never encountered Timmy like this before and gingerly forced himself to put a hand on Timmy's back. "What's the matter?" After many minutes of convulsions and a dozen Kleenex, Timmy managed to make clear that he was sorry for what he had caused and he wished that everything could be back the way it had been before. "Nobody wants it more than me," John said. "I love your mother, but she had no business dressing you up as her little girl and then foisting this upon me. It was my idea," Timmy tried to protest through sobs. "You're too young to have ideas like that. Anyway, it's your mom's job to teach and direct you, that's a parent's responsibility." Timmy wondered if what his dad was saying was right. Did he really feel the way he thought he did? There was something about being a boy that he knew he would never be able to stomach. It just wasn't him. Listening to his dad made him want to be a girl even more desperately than he had ever wanted to before. It was like a safe harbor where he could finally not have to put on a role. Of course, the great irony was that to all outsiders, his being a girl was the acting part. Timmy finally regained control of himself and sat down to finish his dinner. After that, the two of them regarded each other with complete formality, avoiding any discussion of the central issues affecting their lives together. John's stubborn refusal to even think of discussion or compromise finally got the better of Harriet, and she called him up. "Where is the John the first knew so well and loved so much?" she asked in a thick, emotional voice. "He's right here," John said. "Then why is it coming to this? Jesus Christ, Harriet, you are so unbelievably thick-headed. It's you! For how many months did you plot behind my back turning Timmy into a girl wannabe? You can't do things like that and expect forgiveness unless you do the hard thinking and reverse yourself. Why in the world do you expect me to ignore all that and just accept what you did to our son? As I've said a million times now, I didn't do anything to our son. I merely let him do what he wanted to do. This discussion is pointless. That's why we have a court date." The day of the court hearing, Harriet woke up shaking with anxiety. She could lose her son. The unreality of this possibility had sustained her in the previous weeks. But now it felt all too real. It was a real possibility. Of course, John was gone already, and the pain of that separation continued to wash over her 100 times a day. She could end the day with neither Timmy or John. She might kill herself if that were to happen. Who knew? Would she have enough self-control not to do so? The lawyer had instructed her to have someone else take Timmy to the courthouse and wait with him outside the hearing room in case the judge wanted to question him. Harriet had arranged for Ruth to come over to the house that morning and supervise getting Timmy ready and then driving him over at the appropriate time. Harriet had to leave early to have a last-minute chat with her lawyer. The lawyer had told her to make sure that Timmy appeared in some nice respectful clothes, a suit or sports coat and good slacks. Make him look like the all-American boy, she had said. It wasn't 100% certain that Timmy would have to appear, but it was important to be ready in case he did. We'll see what direction the hearing takes with the judge we get, her lawyer had said. If he looks the part of a handsome young man, it'll be that much harder for John to convince the judge that you feminized him. It'll fit in with your argument that cross-dressing is something he does entirely on his own, independently of you. Harriet had then taken Timmy shopping and bought him a nice pair of pants, a white shirt and blue blazer. He looked totally cute in it, she thought. Just before Harriet left for the courthouse, Ruth came over. "Don't worry about Timmy," Ruth said. "I'll get him there all spiffed up and ready to go." "Thanks, dear, this has been so stressful." The sisters embraced and Harriet left. Ruth went upstairs to Timmy's room and called out to him, "Are you ready to go?" "Yes," Timmy said. Ruth entered his bedroom and saw him staring at himself in the mirror. "What a lovely little ensemble you've got. I love that blazer." Timmy looked completely unhappy with his image. "Mom says I have to dress like a boy today if I'm going to be able to dress as a girl in the future. It's a legal strategy her lawyer thinks is best." "I know, but I was thinking that it can't be right." "Why not?" "My daddy thinks I'm a boy." "This will only prove he's right to the judge." "It's more complicated than that, Timmy. The case isn't about showing that you're a girl so you can be with your mom or being a boy and living with your dad." "My dad is wrong. It's only because he's never seen me as a girl. If I could go as a girl, then he'll see that I am a girl and he won't want to make me be a boy anymore." Ruth laughed to herself. It was a very simple logic from Timmy's point of view. "Your dad hasn't seen you as a girl?" "No. He got so mad that he never had a chance to, and when I go to his apartment I don't have my girl clothes with me." "Please, Aunt Ruth, can I wear my pretty dress to the courtroom? I just know if my daddy saw me he would know I was his little girl." Ruth sat down. This was more complicated than she thought. She hadn't particularly understood the lawyer's strategy. What if that was completely wrong-headed? Having Timmy show up as a boy might make Harriet look truly insane for buying him girls' clothes, no matter how much Timmy might say otherwise. In fact, John's lawyer might prevent Timmy from even testifying as to what he wanted. "Okay, Timmy. I think I agree with you. You should go in your pretty dress and let everyone know exactly who you are." "Thank you, Aunt Ruth," Timmy said. "Now we've only got a few minutes to get ready, so let's get cracking." She and Timmy raced around the room getting his ensemble together. When Timmy had changed into his bra, panties, pantyhose and put on the organza over tulle dress, then Ruth quickly helped him with his hair, makeup, nails and anything else that needed tending to. When they were done she took a look at him and said, "Almost perfect. Anyway, it's the best we could do in a few minutes. Now let's go to court." Even though Ruth tried to sound as positive as she could, she realized that by contradicting the lawyer and Harriet she had set herself up for tremendous rebuke if the plan should backfire. She prayed that she and Timmy's instincts were correct. In the courtroom, John sat with his lawyer on one side of the room and Harriet sat with hers on the other. John had his head lowered and didn't look at Harriet when she entered the courtroom. A dozen or more spectators, including those waiting for subsequent trials, were seated in the back of the room. Ruth came in and walked up to Harriet and her lawyer and said, "Timmy's outside waiting." "Good," the lawyer said. Ruth went back out to sit with Timmy. She saw John take a quick look at her and then turn away. A minute later the judge entered the chamber and everyone stood, and Harriet's attorney whispered to her, "Damn, it's Judge Bookbinder. He's completely unpredictable, no way of knowing how he'll react." When they were all seated, Harriet and John's case was announced and the judge studied the papers in front of him and then said, "Is this true?" He studied the papers some more and then looked up, surveyed the room and stared at John. "So you're the father and husband?" John stood up and said, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge then looked at Harriet and said, "And I take it you're the mother?" She stood up and said, "Yes, sir." Harriet and John sat down and the judge shook his head. "Before we get to the lawyers, I want to see this child." "Your Honor, he's waiting right outside the door," Harriet's lawyer said. "Bailiff, go outside and tell the child to come in." The bailiff got up and went outside. After a long wait he came back in shaking his head and addressed the judge. "The child is coming in now." Everyone in the courtroom turned to look to the back and Timmy came in escorted by Ruth. At the sight of his pretty pink and white organza over tulle dress there were audible gasps from Harriet and her lawyer. John looked utterly dazed by what he saw. As a last-second touch, Ruth had added a pink bow to Timmy's hair. In a loud voice the judge said, "Young lady, there is some mistake." "Bailiff, let's get the little boy, what's his name?" "Timmy in here." "He's Timmy, Your Honor," Ruth said, and a second later Timmy said, "I'm Timmy." There was some snickering in the back rows of the courtroom. Ruth took a vacant seat and Timmy stood where he was regarding the judge. "I'm Timmy," Timmy said again in a small plaintive voice. The judge smacked his gavel down hard and said, "I've seen enough." Addressing Ruth he said, "Miss, could you escort the child back outside for a moment?" Ruth got up and led Timmy out of the courtroom. When they had left the judge said, "I'm going to tell both the parents straight up that one or both of them are at very grave risk right now. Before we get your lawyers yapping at each other and dissecting everything that has gone on in this family and who should take what prize in the end, I'm directing the bailiff to escort the two of you and Timmy to a room where you will work out your differences and find peace as a family. This is your best option right now. You will now go do it before the rest of us take control of your family and create an outcome that you are all likely to regret the rest of your lives." The judge stared hard at John and then Harriet. There was no inkling in his face which way he leaned or what he thought about Timmy. John and Harriet got up and followed the bailiff outside, and the judge banged his gavel and said, "Next case." United together in a small conference room, John and Harriet sat facing each other across a table. Timmy came in and went right to his father and stood looking at him. John looked back at Timmy. He looked in his eyes and saw it brimming over with tears. He saw the quivering lips with lipstick and the perfume wafted into his consciousness. The boy seemed filled with love and hope and need for his dad. John felt his own eyes filling with tears, and when he saw it, Timmy moved in slowly and wrapped his hands around his dad's neck. And then his dad put his arms around the little boy in his organza and tulle dress and pulled him in close and hugged him. Harriet burst into tears and sobbed. "Oh, my Timmy," John said. "I love you, Daddy," Timmy said. "I had no idea," John said, and after a long pause, "I'm sorry, Harriet." "I don't blame you, honey," Harriet said. "I never stopped loving you. It's been so painful. Because I loved you, it hurt so much more." "It's just been a little rough patch," Harriet said, "but it's over now." Timmy let go of his dad and John got up and walked around the table to Harriet. She got up and they embraced, and then Timmy joined them. "I guess we've got a lot of hard work to do for my daughter now," John said. "Truly," Harriet said, smiling through her tears. Back home after their day in court, Ruth joined the family and they sat reunited in the living room. Timmy sat between his dad and mom, and Ruth faced them, enjoying the spectacle. "How did you figure out to dress him like this?" Harriet asked Ruth. You know what my lawyer instructed. It was all Timmy's idea, Ruth said. Something in my gut told me that he knew better than everyone how to fix what was broken, and I decided to trust him. He could see the paths to our hearts better than anyone else. That's my little girl, John said and then laughed. It will take some getting used to. Harriet smiled at him and Timmy leaned into him a bit closer. The end statistical fact, approximately only 1 in 1,000 readers of this or any other story offer comments.